In 2004, a mother of two was subjected to a brutal assault that nearly ended her life.
And I remember looking at him and he said, "You're going to regret this."
The perpetrator was her ex-husband. Despite the severity of the attack, the victim managed to survive and has since become an inspiring figure for many. The case brought to light serious issues surrounding domestic violence and the need for effective protective measures. Not long after they were married, Teri Jendusa-Nicolai began to see her husband David Larson's true nature. He would yell at her if the towels weren't folded a certain way, or even if the window curtains were out of place. He insisted she keep the door open when she was showering or using the bathroom. Teri started getting so afraid of his rash, explosive reactions to accidents, like breaking a glass. She would throw away any incriminating evidence that would cause Larson to get angry in the neighbor's garbage bin. One day, Larson pulled a freezer-burned sausage link out of the trash and berated her for wasting his money. "Why don't you bring it over here and I'll cook it up for you?" she quipped. As per her, she'll never forget the evening when a fight broke out between her and Larson over spaghetti. Teri was making dinner and had all of the ingredients out on the counter when her husband demanded she put the package of noodles away before they went bad. Teri pushed back. "Do you want to eat dinner or not? They're dry noodles." Larson responded that it didn't matter if he made sense or not. She was to do as he said. The argument escalated and Teri found herself running down the basement stairs. She had no other place to go. David had installed locks on the inside of the doors that only his keys could open. "I'm 30 years old, sitting in a box in my basement, hiding from my husband. What the hell am I doing?" she thought. 3 years later, Teri had turned her life around. She'd met and married a wonderful man, Nicolai, who loved her and her daughters, and they'd recently learned they were expecting. But the divorce from David had spawned a bitter legal battle, with Teri fighting for full custody of the kids.
On January 31st of 2001, the date of our divorce, when we walked out of the courtroom, he was crying. And I remember looking at him thinking, why is he crying? He hates me.
"He's violent towards me. Why should he be alone with our kids?" she'd argued. But the court was impressed by the fact that a father wanted to spend time with his children. David continued to verbally and physically assault Teri whenever she would drop off or pick up their daughters. It got so bad that she began insisting they exchange the kids in public places like McDonald's or the hardware store. She called the police twice and, eventually, filed a restraining order against him. Even though the order barred David from possessing weapons, Teri knew he still kept firearms in the house. But without the search warrant needed to prove the guns were there, police had no way of enforcing the order's stipulation. Still, Teri held out hope that her ex had moved beyond the animosity. Despite the restraining order, when David asked Teri to collect their daughters from his house, she agreed. She couldn't ask her husband or friends to accompany her every time she needed to pick up her kids, she reasoned. David was still living in the house they had shared while married, in conditions that bordered on hoarding. He had held onto mementos from their wedding, including her dress, photo albums, and video footage, which he showed to the girls as proof that Mommy doesn't keep her promises. When Teri arrived that fateful day, David was uncharacteristically calm. The fact that it had been 3 years to the date since they divorced wasn't lost on her. He said the girls, then 6 and 4, were playing hide and seek and wanted Teri to find them. Even though her gut told her not to, she didn't want to disappoint her kids. She stepped inside the house. On January 31st, 2004, Larson attacked his ex-wife, Teri Jendusa-Nicolai, in Wind Lake, Wisconsin, home after luring her inside. He beat and subdued her. Unfortunately, for him, that wasn't enough. He then proceeded to tie her head and hands with tape and then sealed her into a big garbage bin that he had previously partly filled with snow. Teri was pregnant at the time. At one point, Larson allegedly told Teri that, "You always say I abuse you. Now you know what abuse is. Larson then proceeded to place the garbage bin containing Teri in the bed of his pickup truck. Then Larson towed Teri's car to a neighborhood in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In Milwaukee, he left her car and discarded the tow dolly. With Teri still entrapped in the garbage bin in the bed of his pickup truck, Larson drove her from Milwaukee, Wisconsin to Wheeling, Illinois. Teri wasn't going down that easy. Somewhere along the way, she was able to make not one, but 2 911 calls. Right after she made those calls, she attempted to free her hand, in which she succeeded and then attempted to flag down someone in traffic to rescue her. But unfortunately, Larson saw her trying to wave her hand. He stopped the truck and went out to mercilessly struck her again, and this time, even took away her cell phone. Although here is no evidence indicating or disclosing exactly where that happened. After Larson arrived in Illinois with Teri in the back, he placed the garbage bin containing Teri in a self-storage locker that he had previously rented some years earlier. To make sure Teri couldn't get out this time, he mercilessly placed not one, not two, but 3 heavy boxes, each one being over 30 pounds, weighing a total of 106 pounds, over the top of the garbage bin. He then left, abandoning her there, in the ice-cold container, to die. Before leaving, he also propped a board against the garbage bin to prevent it from tipping over. It was clear that he absolutely didn't want her to get out alive. When an Amber Alert returned nothing, police waited for David to report to his job as an air traffic controller. But there were no signs of Teri or their daughters in his car when he showed up. Officers told him his ex-wife was missing, and would he mind coming down to the station to see if he could help. Detectives Chris Schmaling and Thomas Naus spent 6.5 hours questioning David when it was all said and done. Right away, he told them that Teri hadn't shown up to pick up their daughters that day, so he had dropped the kids off at his girlfriend's house before heading to work. Authorities quickly checked the location and were relieved to find out that the children are there and safe. But both girls said they hadn't seen their mom at all that day. I was begging him, talking to him with a tremendous amount of respect, says Schmaling. Time was of the essence if they were going to find Teri alive. Then, detectives revealed that they'd found Teri's pants and blood in David's house. He started getting emotional as I was calling him on his lies, says Schmaling. David claimed Teri had attacked him first and that he responded in self-defense. The rest, he said, was all a blur, but authorities finally had gathered enough evidence to detain him. In doing so, detectives confiscated what personal belongings David had on him, including a wallet jam-packed with business cards and receipts. Inside, they found a card for a storage facility near the town where David owned property. A phone call confirmed that he had a storage unit there which he'd visited that morning. Police officers found Teri in the corner of that unit. Her core body temperature was 86 degrees Fahrenheit. She was within an hour of dying, doctors would later say. The fetus that had been growing in her belly for weeks was no longer viable. David Larson had inflicted so much trauma on Teri, including a fatal crushing injury to her skull. Authorities feared they would cause further damage if they tried to move her from the trash can, so they left her in the garbage receptacle until paramedics arrived. Reflecting on the storage unit's location, Schmaling made a chilling conclusion. Larson was an air traffic controller. He could look out the window, see the storage facility from his tower, and know she was suffering or dead already. Doctors were required to amputate her toes. A few days later, she suffered a miscarriage. Teri's fight didn't end there. In a tort suit, she and her present husband sought justice. A Wisconsin state court awarded her a $3.4 million judgment against David for battery, false imprisonment, and emotional distress. Her daughters and husband received compensation for loss of consortium. On August 16, 2005, David Larson was sentenced to 35 years in prison for attempted first-degree intentional homicide. Teri spent almost 7 weeks in the hospital undergoing 10 different operations, and even after she returned home, remained wheelchair-bound for several more weeks. She was pissed that she could no longer jog and, at least for a while, couldn't get upstairs to tuck her daughters into bed at night. But she was grateful that she and her girls were alive and would never have to see David again. Looking back now, she laughs. The person who tried to take her life ended up losing nearly every semblance of his own. Teri became a powerful advocate for victims' rights. She shared her story, exposing the darkness that hides behind closed doors. Her resilience and determination serve as a beacon of hope for survivors everywhere. A few years after the abduction, Teri and Nick welcomed a son, who's now 9, a sweet little brother to teenagers Holly and Amanda. When asked how she found the strength to live on the bitterly cold night she was left to die, Teri quotes Nancy Reagan. "A woman is like a tea bag. Only in hot water do you realize how strong she is."